أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، رب السماوات والأرضين، وصلى الله على خير خلقه خاتم رسله صفوة أنبيائه سيدنا والشهيد علينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم، وعلى من اتبعهم إلى يوم الدين. Dear brothers, dear sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We will continue to gain further knowledge of the depths of meanings of these ayat that speak to us about people right now and their racist self-centeredness. A racist self-centeredness that has stumbled and fallen throughout history and still, by and large, has not learned from its sins and from its deviations. The last time we began with ayah 247. وقال لهم نبيهم إن الله قد بعث لكم طالوت ملكا. Their prophet, their meaning Bani Israel, their prophet said to them, indeed, Allah has sent for you Talut as your Malik, as your sovereign now. They responded, قالوا أن يكون له الملك علينا. How can he have sovereignty over us? The first observation here is that instead of them being obedient to their prophet, they show a character of insurrection or insubordination. You would expect from followers of prophets to listen to their prophets and obey their prophets. But when their prophet told them that Allah has sent Talut as a Malik for you, to you and for you, they question that. They don't question it as a matter of sincerity. They question that as a matter of trying to subordinate the will of Allah to their worldly preferences. It's very important to understand that, because in some of the Judeo-Christian context, much of the arguments between Bani Israel and the prophets, much of these arguments are justified with good intentions by Bani Israel. And Allah is explaining to us, no, there were no good intentions by Bani Israel. This was a matter of defiance. So they said to their prophet, أَنَّا يَكُونُ لَهُ الْمُلْكُ عَلَيْنَا. But how in the world, this is, I'm obviously paraphrasing, but the wording of the ayah in the Arabic language, it has this aroma to it. But how in the world can he be a king over us? قالوا أَنَّا يَكُونُ لَهُ الْمُلْكُ عَلَيْنَا. Remember, we want to pause here and notice two words. The Prophet was telling them, Allah has sent for you a Malik. He has sent to and for you a Malik. Their response was, but how can he be a Malik over us? The Prophet did not say, Inna Allah ba'atha alaykum malika. He said, Inna Allah ba'atha lakum malika. So, if they were listening closely to Allah and His Prophet, they would have realized that this Malik was one of them, was part of them. But they drew, as is in their nature, a discriminatory line. This shows the internal prejudice that they harbor. So now they are discriminating between a person that Allah has sent to be their Malik and their own selves. And they are misunderstanding their Prophet and misunderstanding Allah by saying that He is going to become a sovereign over us. And that's not, in Allah, the Prophet didn't say, Inna Allah ba'atha alaykum malika. He said, ba'atha lakum malika. قالوا أَنَّا يَكُونُ لَهُ الْمُلْكُ عَلَيْنَا. Now, they want to justify the ayah, the words here in this ayah, make it divulge to us their psychology, the way they think. So they say, وَنَحْنُ أَحَقُّ بِالْمُلْكِ مِنْهُ. We, Bani Israel, we deserve to be our own sovereigns, which infers that whoever Allah has chose to be a Malik for them, they did not consider him an insider. They did not consider him one of them, even though he may have been in their general community. But he is not an elite. And the ayah goes on to say, وَلَمْ يُؤْتَ سَعَةً مِّنَ الْمَالِ. And he doesn't have all of this financial wherewithal. He's not very rich. وَلَمْ يُؤْتَ سَعَةً مِّنَ الْمَالِ. See, the world of finances, the world of wealth, the world of riches and treasures, وَلَمْ يُؤْتَ, meaning they expected whoever is going to be their executive commander, their Malik, they expected that person to be very rich. قالوا أَنَّا يَكُونُ لَهُ الْمُلْكُ عَلَيْنَا وَنَحْنُ أَحَقُّ بِالْمُلْكِ مِنْهُ وَلَمْ يُؤْتَ سَعَةً مِّنَ الْمَالِ. So here they are objecting to Allah's choice, and they are objecting to their own Prophet who told them of Allah's choice. And they explained why they objected. Because they are the cream of the crop, and they expected whoever is going to be leading them, their chief executive, they expected him to be one of them. Now, it's easy for some Muslims now, I hope we are all together in understanding this, word by word, step by step, development after development. We look at Bani Israel, and hopefully, we don't have any interfering factor, and we can see that deficiency in them. We can see that deformity in their minds and hearts. But can we see it in us? You think Bani Israel is some type of extraterrestrial psychology and character? It's human nature. When we fail, I don't want to mention any certain buzzwords that get on people's nerves, but there is among us Muslims, whether it is a political party, whether it is a sectarian context, whether it is a cultural background, whether even it is a religious persuasion. If it's not one of us, then we don't accept it. And this is what they are saying. This is what Bani Israel is saying. So what's the difference between what Bani Israel said then and says now, and what some Muslims are doing now? Remember, another way of defining Bani Israel is they are Muslims who have failed. Banu Israel are the historical and contemporary Muslims with a small m who have failed. وَلَمْ يُؤْتَ سَاعَةً مِنَ الْمَالِ. The response of the Prophet to this type of answer that they gave him, قال إن الله اصطفاه عليكم وزاده بسطة في العلم والجسم. The Prophet made it clear to them that Allah has privileged him over you. So who are you to object to Allah's choice? Who are you? They claim that their solidarity is their strength. Their ethnic solidarity is their strength, is their score of privilege. Allah is saying to them, even though you consider yourselves like that, but when Allah has chosen someone to be your chief executive, you should submit to that. You shouldn't have any second thoughts. You shouldn't be arguing this whole thing. Why we argue? Why is this whole argument going on, this back and forth? If they had a clean heart and a clear mind, they could have just gone ahead. No questions asked. But here they are, jumping around the bush. وَزَادَهُ بَسْطَةً فِي الْعِلْمِ وَالْجِسْمِ. Allah has given him more latitude of knowledge for what he is responsible for doing. وَالْجِسْمِ, even physically speaking, he is superior to you. وَزَادَهُ بَسْطَةً فِي الْعِلْمِ وَزَادَهُ بَسْطَةً فِي الْعِلْمِ وَالْجِسْمِ. And this is, we have to look at individuals, we have to look at their merits. When someone is to assume a responsibility, we have to identify whether that person is qualified for assuming that responsibility. Money does not qualify a person for positions. Wealth is not a qualifier. That's what they were saying. وَلَمْ يُؤْتَ سَعَةً مِنَ الْمَالِ. To become a chief executive, probably the counter argument to Bani Israel is precisely the opposite of what they are saying. And that is, to qualify to be a chief executive in a position to go to war, you don't need money. Actually, what you need is the knowledge that pertains to the duties that are to be performed, and you need the physical capacity. You can't, put a person in charge when he is handicapped, in charge in that position when that person is handicapped, obviously. Or you can't put a person in charge to lead a battalion or a division of armed forces when that person's health is failing. وَزَادَهُ بَسْطَةً فِي الْعِلْمِ وَالْجِسْمِ وَاللَّهُ يُؤْتِي مُلْكَهُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is responding to Bani Israel that it is Allah who chooses anyone He decides for this leading position, being the commander-in-chief. وَاللَّهُ يُؤْتِي مُلْكَهُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ وَاسِعٌ عَلِيمٌ. They said وَلَمْ يُؤْتَ سَعَةً مِنَ الْمَالِ. He does not have this expansion of wealth. Allah is reminding them that if you're talking about expansion of wealth or expansion of influence, that expansion is referred to Allah. That belongs to Allah, doesn't belong to any human being. So Allah is in charge here. When He appoints whomever He appoints, when He chooses whomever He chooses, when He decides upon whomever He decides upon, it is Allah who is wasi'un alim. Ultimate knowledge is referred to Him. But they want people to believe that they are the ones who are on top. They have ultimate knowledge. They know who is more qualified to be in that sensitive position. أَنَّ يَكُونُ لَهُ الْمُلْكُ عَلَيْنَا. So, it appears Talut was not one of these people who belonged to their inner circle, to their secret society, to their initiated group of people, to their cabal. So they objected. They didn't want someone who Allah chooses. They wanted someone who they choose and they endorse. Then we go on to ayah number 248. The ayah number 248 says, وَقَالَ لَهُمْ نَبِيُّهُمْ إِنَّ آيَةَ مُلْكِهِ أَنْ يَأْتِيَكُمُ التَّابُوتُ. This is still back and forth between a prophet and a racial group of people. Racial in their majority, racist in their upper crust. وقال لهم نبيهم إن آية ملكه أن يأتيكم التابوت. Their prophet said to them that the ayah, the miraculous validation of his being your chief executive, وقال لهم نبيهم إن آية ملكه أن يأتيكم التابوت. The validation of Talut's leadership is that there is going to come to you a taboot, a casket. The word taboot is mentioned twice in the Quran. Here we see it in this ayah 248 in Surah Al-Baqarah. The other time that it is mentioned in the Quran is in the narrative or in the story about Musa, the mother of Musa, at the time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired her to place Musa on the flowing waters to rescue him from the death sentence that Pharaoh had passed on the children of Bani Israel. In the ayah says, I believe it's Surah Al-Qasas, إِذْ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّكَ مَا يُوحَى. Bear in mind when we inspired your mother, you, O Musa, we inspired your mother with an inspiration, with what is to be befitting of her in that moment to deserve that inspiration. إِذْ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّكَ مَا يُوحَى أَنْ اقْذِفِيهِ فِي التَّابُوتِ. You push him into, while he is in a tabut, that small casket. What is meant here are floating woods that are woods that float. They are put together so that the baby, Musa as a baby, can float. فَقْذِفِيهِ فِي الْيَمِّ. Push him into the flowing waters. فَلْيُلْقِهِ الْيَمُّ بِالسَّاحِلِ. So that the floating waters may take him to the beach area. And from there on, people will see a baby and they will rescue the baby and take him to be taken care of. So what may be understood from the combination of these two ayat is that there's been a longing in the history of Bani Israel. There's been a yearning in the history of Bani Israel to reclaim this tabut in which Musa was saved from the royal decree of the Pharaoh to have him, he The only thing the Pharaoh knew was there's going to be a newborn from Bani Israel that is going to threaten and bring down the Pharaoh's power structure and cause the demise of the Pharaoh himself. That's all you know. He didn't know exactly who Musa was, so that's why he gave his orders to have all of the newborn babies of Bani Israel executed within that year or two in which he had information that someone is going to be born who is going to be what we call today a national security threat to the Pharaonic Egyptian establishment. Which tells us also, I don't want to, go far away in this, which tells us also that people in the position of the Pharaoh, we have pharaohs in today's world, they don't call themselves pharaohs, but for all practical purposes, they are pharaohs. These types of people, they have information that would predict certain developments. They don't have accurate predictions, they may have just general knowledge of something that is going to be happening in the coming time frame, in a certain time frame. So if the Pharaoh at that time had knowledge of this, why would not the pharaohs of our time have knowledge of certain dangerous pending developments? So Banu Israel at that time, they were waiting for something that would bring back this tabut, in which it could be considered that it is a symbol of their salvation and their exodus from Egypt. So this prophet is telling them that to demonstrate the legitimacy of Talut, this new commander-in-chief that Allah has appointed, to demonstrate that there's going to be this miraculous appearance of this tabut. And this would smack, this understanding, this ayah would smack those who attribute some type of shirk to symbols in history. Shirkiyat, kufriyat, wathaniyat, all of this type of stuff that they say about. I mean, look, if let's say someone goes to Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, I think that's where the Grand Museum of Islamic History is at, and you see these different objects that belong to the Prophet or the household of the Prophet or the generation of the Prophet, the sword of Imam Ali or the mikhala, the container that kuhel, in English, I'm not in the cosmetic area, so I don't know. But anyways, it's that fine powder that you put on the eye. If you see things like that, or they say that there's a hair from the Prophet or whatever, what do you think? I mean, a Muslim, when he sees these, there's some type of shirk. This destruction of the meaning, this reduction and destruction of the meaning of shirk is pitiful. For the sake of Allah, let's outgrow this importation of the definition of shirk from those who went, from the British who went to Arabia and went to Southern Asia and infested us with Judeo-biblic terminology that has crept into our understanding of the Quran. If this tabut that is mentioned here in this ayah, if this was going to be brought to Bani Israel, something that they would be very appreciative of, if that was shirk, it would have been condemned here. It's not condemned. It is presented as proof from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It says, يَأْتِيكُمُ التَّابُوتِ إِنَّ آيَةَ مُلْكِهِ أَنْ يَأْتِيَكُمُ التَّابُوتِ فِيهِ سَكِينَةٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. In the coming of this taboot, you will find a serenity from your sustainer. It's not that you're going to find, oh my God, this is shirk. We can't do this. No. فيه سكينة من ربكم وبقية مما ترك آل موسى وآل فرعون تحمله الملائكة. وبقية. In this taboot, there may be some of these instruments, these small objects that was left by Alu Musa and Alu Harun. So whatever belonged to them that now has come to you, being carried, تحمله الملائكة. Can you envision something that no one can see al-malaika? So this taboot, when it comes to them, this is a demonstration of a miracle. And their history is full of these physical, material, palpable miracles. And this is another one. You want proof? Okay, here you are. تحمله الملائكة, being carried by unseen forces. إن في ذلك لآية لكم إن كنتم مؤمنين. Truth be said, in this development there is a demonstration of Allah's power and authority. There is an obvious miracle for you to comprehend. In kuntum mu'minin, provided you are committed to Allah, His power and His authority. In kuntum mu'minin. Are they? Are they committed to Allah's power and authority? So we have here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is demonstrating to them this taboot that was not in their possession, that was somewhere. It's coming to them from the unknown. They didn't know where it was. They knew there was a taboot, but they didn't know where it was. They didn't know how to take possession of it. And beside all of this, they had this yearning for it. They wanted to have it. And Allah did not condemn them for yearning for an object that belonged to their prophet, that belonged to their life and death history. He didn't condemn them for that. He responded to that yearning that they had in them favorably. Okay. I think I'm sort of approaching, there's the ayah right now that we are going to begin. فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ قَالَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مُبْتَلِيكُمْ بِنَهَرٍ. Actually, we can begin the first part of this ayah. So, when this happened, all of this taboot coming to Bani Israel, all of the rest of the give and take that was going on between their prophet and the elites of Bani Israel, all of this came to rest. There's no longer an argument back and forth, which means the elites of Bani Israel, along with Bani Israel, they came to terms with the fact that Talut is now the commander-in-chief or the chief executive. Finished. So here, the ayat, the almost cinematic type of ayat, it's as if we're seeing this unfolding in front of our own eyes. فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ. All of the details concerning the enlistment and the volunteering effort and the signing up for military service, all of those details have been skipped. Now we have a good number of people who acknowledged the commanding position of Talut. And now we have this ayah, فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ. So now we have Talut marching on with his troops. Al-Junud is a word that is taken from, actually the word itself is Jund. And Jund means the rough terrain. The original Arabic word belongs to the surface of the earth. When you find rough terrain, it's called Jund. And people who are dispatched for a rough terrain or a rough going, military duties are a rough going, a demanding task, an exhausting journey. That's why they're called Jund. And there are words in Arabic that refer to one, but that one is inclusive of many. And here, Junud is the plural of Jund, that is one group that is inclusive of many. Another Quranic word is ta'ifa. وَإِن طَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اقْتَتَلُوا. And if there are two factions of Muslims that go to war against themselves, not against the two. Here we have two factions. In each factions there are many, and when the war develops, it's that those many that go to war against themselves. It's not two units at war. There are many in each of these units that are at war with themselves. فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ. So when Talut ventures out, Talut is dispatched from the rest of society. Now they're on the warpath with the troops. فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ قَالَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مُبْتَلِيكُمْ بِنَهَرٍ. He said to them, verily Allah is going to test you with a river. Many or quite a few Muslims understand the word ibtala to have a negative meaning to it. No, ibtala has a neutral meaning to it. It just means Allah is going to test you. So Allah is going to be looking at the results of your test. Inna Allah mubtalikum binahar. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us all. I sort of ran out of time now. Insha'Allah, we will continue this presentation when we meet again. Keep your hearts and minds with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Learn from the prophets of Allah. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon them. Avoid the mistakes of those who said that they belonged to the prophets of Allah. And may the Quran and may the embodiment of the Quran, which is Allah's final prophet and those who belong to Him, may they come to life as we trail these life-giving meanings in this life-giving book. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ah. O Allah, show us truth and justice to be exactly what it is, truth and justice, and offer us whatever it takes to fall in with truth and justice. وَأَرِنَا الْبَاطِلَ بَاطِلًا وَارْزُقْنَا اجْتِنَابَهُ. And show us falsifications and falsity to be exactly what they are, and offer us the ability to avoid that. وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. And render us to be in the positions of leading al-muttaqeen. وصلى الله على محمد وآل محمد. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.